sorry. I have 3 other interviews to do.
In 1986, David Cronenberg's The Fly redefined body horror. It presented audiences with a stomach-churning spectacle of physical decay, a masterpiece of practical effects that won an Academy Award for its unflinching depiction of a man's complete biological collapse. We all remember the on-screen horror. The pus, the acid vomit, the final monstrous fusion of man and insect. But what if that was only half the story? What if the true horror of The Fly wasn't just what happened on screen, but what happened when the cameras stopped rolling? The film's themes of disease, tragedy, and decay were not just creative choices. They were forged in the fires of real-world danger, profound personal loss, and a series of bizarre, unsettling truths that remained hidden behind the scenes. The fiction you saw was a mirror. This is the horrifying reality it was reflecting. Number 10. The Comedian's Warning. Every great horror film has a memorable tagline, a phrase that encapsulates its terror. For The Fly, that phrase was a simple, chilling command. Be afraid. Be very afraid. It's a line that perfectly captures the film's creeping dread. But the origin of that line is the first clue that nothing about this film is what it seems. Because the author of that iconic warning was one of the greatest comedians of all time. The film was produced by Brooks Films, the production company of Mel Brooks. Known for comedies like Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, Brooks deliberately kept his name off the marketing for The Fly, fearing audiences wouldn't take the horror seriously if they knew he was involved. But his contribution went far beyond financing. During a production meeting, the team was discussing how the characters should react to the early stages of Seth Brundle's transformation. It was Brooks who offered the perfect summary of the terror to come. It was his idea, his words. Be afraid. Be very afraid. This strange contradiction, a master of laughter crafting a mantra of pure fear, is the first crack in the facade. It's the first sign that the film's very DNA is a fusion of opposites, a hint of the bizarre reality hiding just beneath the fiction. Number 9. The Unpredictable Primate. While Mel Brooks provided the film's psychological terror, a very real physical threat was lurking on set. In the film, Seth Brundle's experiments with teleporting living creatures begin with a baboon. The animal used on set, named Typhoon, was not a trained Hollywood performer. He was a wild animal, and the cast and crew quickly learned the terrifying reality of that fact. Director David Cronenberg later stated that Typhoon was very volatile, and that there is no such thing as a tame baboon. This wasn't an exaggeration. During one take, the flashing lights inside the telepod prop startled the powerful animal. In a burst of panic and rage, Typhoon broke the prop door clean off its hinges to escape the enclosure. The set descended into chaos. The only people who could bring the primate under control were its professional wrangler and, unexpectedly, the film's star. Jeff Goldblum, standing at 6 feet 4 inches, had to use his sheer size and strength to help dominate and contain the panicked animal. The film's narrative is about an experiment spiraling out of control. But for a few terrifying moments on set, that fiction became a reality. The horror wasn't in the script. It was a real, unpredictable force of nature that had just broken free.
How you doing?
Number 8. The Edible Ichor. One of the most revolting aspects of Brundle's transformation is his new method of eating. He begins vomiting a corrosive, digestive enzyme onto his food to liquefy it before consumption. Later, he uses the same fluid as a weapon, melting the hand and foot of his rival, Stathis Borans, in the film's gruesome climax. The effect is stomach-churning, a complete violation of human biology. The substance itself looks toxic, otherworldly, but the reality of its creation reveals the bizarre alchemy of filmmaking, where nightmares are built from the most mundane materials imaginable. That vile, corrosive enzyme was, in fact, completely edible. It was a simple concoction mixed up by makeup supervisor Stéphane Dupuis. The recipe? Honey, eggs, milk, flour, and some food coloring. The most repulsive visual in the film was made from the contents of a refrigerator. This is the architecture of a nightmare, transforming the ordinary into the obscene. It's a horrifying magic trick, forcing you to question what truly disgusts you, the grotesque fantasy on screen, or the mundane reality that it was made from. Number 7. The actor's prison. The transformation of Seth Brundle is the heart of the film's horror, an achievement that earned the makeup team an Oscar. But for actor Jeff Goldblum, this artistic triumph was a daily ordeal of physical endurance. The Oscar-winning makeup wasn't just an application, it was a prison of latex and rubber that took a profound physical and psychological toll. Each day, Goldblum would spend up to 5 hours in a dentist-style chair as the crew applied the increasingly complex layers of prosthetics. After a full day of shooting, it would take another hour just to remove it all. In the later stages, the makeup weighed around 5 pounds, a grotesque second skin that Goldblum had to wear and, more importantly, act through. His performance and the effects became symbiotic. Trapped beneath layers of latex, his expressive, sorrowful eyes became the last anchor of his character's humanity. Even his signature nervous twitches were studied by the effects team and programmed into the movements of the final, full-body Brundlefly puppet. The methodical 7-stage process was a slow erasure of the actor, mirroring the character's own loss of identity.
It's kind of very hot, but in part of the makeup, my whole, there's kind of this weight on my eyes all the time, and to kind of see, I have to keep doing that, you know, so it's very, very exhausting.
Number 6. The Ghost in the Machine. The tragedy of The Fly is, at its core, a failed romance. The love story between Seth Brundle and Veronica Quaife gives the film its emotional weight. That on-screen chemistry was so powerful because it was real. Actors Jeff Goldblum and Geena Davis were a couple during the making of the film, and their real-life relationship began to bleed into their performances in unsettling ways. Director David Cronenberg noticed a strange problem during filming. Geena Davis, whom he called an adept mimic, had begun to unconsciously adopt Goldblum's unique, staccato speech patterns and quirky body language. Their real-life closeness was causing their characters to merge. Cronenberg had to actively work to disconnect them, to pull their performances apart to maintain the integrity of their separate characters. The lines blurred further. The film's plot involves Seth's growing paranoia and jealousy over Veronica's relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Stothis. Off-screen, Goldblum admitted to feeling pangs of real jealousy when Davis was filming her scenes with actor John Getz. The film's emotional core isn't just great acting, it's a reflection of real-life emotional turmoil. The line between Seth and Jeff and Veronica and Geena became disturbingly thin. It was a ghost in the machine, where real human emotions haunted the fictional narrative, giving it a terrifying and undeniable authenticity. Number 5. The Inside-Out Nightmare. The first true moment of body horror in The Fly is the failed teleportation of the first baboon. The creature emerges from the receiving telepod as a mangled, inside-out mass of twitching flesh and blood, a horrifying sign of the technology's fatal flaw. Like most of the film's effects, this nightmare was not computer-generated. It was brought to life through a messy, chaotic, and physically demanding practical effect that was as grotesque behind the scenes as it was on screen. To create the effect of the convulsing creature, 2 puppeteers were hidden directly underneath the set floor, physically animating the gruesome puppet from below. A third crew member was with them, whose only job was to pump gallons of fake blood through the prop. The scene was so visceral that the 3 puppeteers had to wear raincoats to protect themselves from the constant spray of stage blood. Imagine that. While the audience sees a sterile scientific laboratory, the reality just inches below the actors' feet was a cramped, dark space where a crew, drenched in fake blood, was manually creating a nightmare. The horror wasn't just what was being made, but the grimy, physical, blood-soaked process of its creation. Number 4. The Butterfly That Never Was. The ending of The Fly is one of the most devastating in horror history. Veronica sobbing gives her monstrous lover a final mercy, ending his suffering with a shotgun blast. It's a bleak, tragic, and unforgettable conclusion. But it wasn't the only ending considered. For a time, the film had a completely different coda, a surreal and strangely hopeful dream sequence that was filmed and then buried. In this lost alternate ending, Veronica has another nightmare. But this time, when she gives birth, it is not to the writhing maggot from her earlier dream. Instead, her baby emerges from its chrysalis with beautiful, iridescent butterfly wings. This ending offers a thematic counterpoint, that transformation doesn't have to be monstrous, it can lead to something beautiful. It suggests a glimmer of hope or redemption born from the tragedy. But when the film was shown to test audiences, the reaction was negative. Director David Cronenberg ultimately decided that the raw, tragic power of the original ending was stronger on its own. By cutting the butterfly baby, the filmmakers made a conscious choice to deny the audience any comfort, any release from the sorrow. This decision solidifies the film's true, terrifying theme. This is not a story about transformation, but about irreversible decay. There is no silver lining. The absence of that butterfly is as important as the presence of the maggot. The film is more horrifying because it actively refuses to offer even a dream of hope. Number 3. The horror deemed too horrific. A film filled with dissolving limbs, grotesque mutations, and gruesome deaths has to have a limit. There has to be a line that cannot be crossed. For the makers of The Fly, they found that line. They filmed a scene so brutal, so morally repulsive, that it had to be cut from the final film, not because it was too gory, but because it threatened to destroy the movie's very soul. In the now infamous monkey cat scene, a desperate Seth Brundle attempts to find a cure by experimenting with the telepods again. He fuses the second baboon with an alley cat, creating a shrieking, two-headed hybrid creature that is clearly in immense agony. Then, as the creature writhes on the floor, Brundle picks up a lead pipe and coldly beats it to death. When this version of the film was shown to a test audience, the reaction was profoundly negative. Viewers who had pitied Seth throughout his entire ordeal suddenly felt nothing but disgust for him. They could no longer sympathize with a character who would inflict such calculated, brutal cruelty on a helpless animal. Producer Stuart Kornfeld realized that this scene was a moral event horizon. It turned a tragic figure into an irredeemable monster. If the audience lost sympathy, the film would cease to be a tragedy and become just another creature feature. The scene had to be cut to save the story's heart. In a final dark twist, the hands seen wielding the pipe in the close-up shots of the deleted scene belonged to director David Cronenberg himself. The most horrifying scene was the one that nearly killed the film's emotional core. A moment where the filmmakers had to perform emergency surgery on their own creation to save it. Number 2. The disease on screen. For decades, The Fly has been interpreted as a powerful allegory for the AIDS epidemic, which was at its terrifying peak when the film was released in 1986. Seth Brundle's wasting disease, his social isolation, the lesions on his skin, all seem to mirror the horrors of that very real plague. And while director David Cronenberg has always acknowledged that interpretation as valid, he revealed that his true intention was something far more universal, and perhaps far more frightening. Cronenberg stated that for him, the film was never about one specific disease. It was about aging and death, something all of us have to deal with. He saw Brundle's transformation as a metaphor for the universal human condition of decay, comparing it to a form of cancer. In the film, Brundle describes his new, brutal mindset as insect politics, a compassionate, less primal instinct that overtakes his humanity as his body fails him. This is the film's deepest and most terrifying secret. A monster or a specific virus can be seen as an external threat, something that happens to you. But aging, disease, and death are not external. They are processes programmed into our own bodies. The threat is already inside. By framing the story this way, Cronenberg transforms Brundle's fate from a unique, sci-fi accident into an accelerated, grotesque version of everyone's fate. The horror is no longer that you could become Brundlefly. The horror is that, in the inescapable march of time and biology, we all are. The monster isn't the fly. The monster is mortality. Number 1. A production born from tragedy. The story of The Fly is a story of loss. The loss of identity, the loss of love, the loss of life. The profound sadness that permeates every frame of the film feels authentic, earned, and it is. Because the most horrifying fact about The Fly is not about a special effect, an on-set mishap, or a creative choice. It is the real-world tragedy that made the entire film possible. David Cronenberg was not the original director chosen for the film. The project was first given to another promising young director named Robert Bierman. But during the pre-production phase, before a single frame was shot, an unthinkable tragedy occurred. Robert Bierman's daughter died in an accident. Devastated by the loss, Bierman withdrew from the film, unable to continue. It was only then, with the director's chair suddenly empty, that the producers approached Cronenberg a second time, who was now available. The film we know, Cronenberg's masterpiece of body horror, his profound meditation on loss, grief, and decay, would not exist if not for this preceding, unspeakable tragedy. The film's fictional sorrow is inextricably linked to a real one. The powerful sense of grief that hangs over the story isn't just brilliant filmmaking, it's an echo. The ghost of a real loss that haunts one of horror's greatest and most heartbreaking films. A comedian's wit, an actor's jealousy, a crew's blood-soaked ordeal, and a father's unimaginable grief. These are the strange and horrifying elements that, through some dark alchemy of cinema, were fused together at a molecular level, just like Seth Brundle in The Fly. They created a film that is more than just a monster movie. It is a tragedy that continues to haunt us, because its horror is rooted in a reality we all must face. In the end, perhaps the film's most famous line isn't its warning, but its epitaph. I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it. But now the dream is over, and the insect is awake.